Look around Atlanta today and you'll see a city teeming with art. From galleries to public plazas, art is everywhere. It inspires, it animates, it reflects the spirit of a city filled with hope and promise. Historically, Atlanta's railroads enabled it to become a fertile ground for creative communities to take root by bringing both artists and audiences here.
You have a lot of movement through the city, and so, hey, if you're coming from South Florida, you're coming from New York going south, or you're coming from the West Coast going north, you got to come through Atlanta at some point in time. So there's always been a scene.
Prior to the 1970s, Atlanta supported the arts by funding institutions.
On an annual basis, the city would make an allocation of somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000, primarily to the symphony and to the Hot Museum.
Liberal arts colleges and universities also provided ample support to emerging and recognized artists.
You had the establishment arts community, and you had some artists and art departments at Spelman and Clark College, but you really didn't have as vibrant and vital a working artist community in the black community. You had nothing happening in the neighborhoods.
But we have to understand that most of Black America did not have access to higher education.
Inspiration and creativity are fundamental to the artistic process, but so too is money. The city's first African-American mayor, Maynard Holbrook Jackson Jr., is credited for boosting Atlanta's public support for the arts and helping to nurture a creative explosion that reverberates today.
A group of art supporters called upon him. The group was led by his aunt, Millicent Dobbs Jordan, older sister of his other aunt, Mattawilda Dobbs, who was the opera singer.
Mattawilda Dobbs was a renowned opera singer in the early 20th century who broke color barriers and performed at many of the world's prestigious opera houses. With the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, she serenaded her nephew and the audience at Maynard Jackson's first inauguration.
So Mayor Jackson, upon his election, decided that he wanted to integrate the arts into his agenda. And he had some ideas about it.
During Jackson's first term, Michael Lomax was a policy researcher specializing in international affairs.
He said, Michael Lomax is going to lead the effort, and we're going to get a group to do the work. And so we did a couple of things. He created something called the Mayor's Ad Hoc Committee for the Arts.
I ended up being a chair of the Ad Hoc Committee on the Arts.
I was appointed to the Ad Hoc Committee on the Arts representing Kelly Seton Free Theater, along with, I would say, 50 other people from the arts. And we're talking about director of the High Museum of Art and director of the Symphony and various art galleries, and individual artists were represented.
That group recommended that the initiative would be serving the institutions and the organizations, but also serving the artists directly, those who were creating the art.
But that formed the work plan, and that was about increasing opportunities for individual artists, increasing exhibit opportunities, getting jobs for artists.
So that was slightly different from the prior administrations that had supported the arts.
The Ad Hoc Committee also recommended that a city agency be created to support public arts. Led by Michael Lomax, Shirley Franklin, and Rob Rivers, the Bureau of Cultural and International Affairs was born. A 1% sales tax was used to fund the new office and provide more art programming. But the new office needed a larger staff, so the city tapped into a stream of federal funds from the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act, or CETA. Enacted by President Richard Nixon in 1973, CETA provided money for public service employment training.
We hired a great team, a really interesting team because it had some artists on it, two of whom who became very famous.
Samuel L. Jackson and LaTanya Richardson. They did improvisational theater on the streets of Atlanta.
During this period, the Bureau stayed busy finding ways to bring art to the public.
We did films in public housing.
Promoting dance companies to go out into various schools and perform. We had a first Mayor's Day for the Arts.
And then we took art to the people. And we had our first outdoor performances in parks by the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra under the baton of Robert Shaw.
But they still needed to satisfy residents who wanted more art and culture facilities in neighborhoods.
We also, very importantly, created two artists' working space.
There were places around the city where artists could gather and invite artists from other parts of the country to come to teach, to learn, to collaborate. So that was a big initiative.
One of them was at what was called the Forest Avenue School, and that became an artist space that was led by Nexus, the photo collective. And then over in Mechanicsville, the Peter James Bryant School became the Neighborhood Art Center.
The Neighborhood Art Center employed a creative staff to teach classes to aspiring artists from the community. The NAC allowed its staff, artists themselves, to earn a living while pursuing their own creative projects.
We had sculptors, painters, a range of people. And we had patrons over there. One of our patrons was Romare Bearden. And Romare, or Romy as we called him, would come over and meet with the artists and the students they were teaching. Really, it was really quite remarkable.
2 more artist studios followed, the Center for Puppetry Arts and the Arts Exchange.
In 1977 is when I discovered the Neighborhood Art Center. I was leaving work. We got to Pryor Street, the bus did, and they opened the doors, and all I could hear were these African drums. I had no idea where I was. I got off that bus, and I started following those drums, and that's how I found the Neighborhood Art Center.
We did a lot of things that were history, in this community. Not just the black community, the white community as well. The greatest public things we did were those things at Piedmont Arts Festival.
One of the NAC's teaching artists, photographer Jim Alexander, challenged his students to see communities through a different lens.
I ran a program called As Seen by Teens. I'd also let them just photograph any and everything that interested them.
His camera captured many of Atlanta's memorable figures and events, like the first years of the Atlanta Jazz Festival. The festival was started by the Bureau in 1978. It is now one of the largest free jazz festivals in the world.
One of my favorite stories is for the Jazz Festival. Miles Davis performed, and I was in the car with him after the performance, and the car door closed as he was getting in, and he had the driver stop, and he opened and closed the door at least 25 or 30 times to implant the sound in his ear, in his memory. Artists see things, hear things that the rest of us just don't hear and see.
Art and music bring people together, and the creation of Atlanta's arts program broke down traditional barriers and forged lasting partnerships.
I think among the great legacies of Maynard's administration, creating a public arts agency from which everything else flowed.
Maynard was elected, less than 10 years after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. So there'd been great divides and limited cross-cultural engagement. The office and Maynard's initiatives and the ad hoc committee brought people together, and we got to know each other. So that was pretty exciting.
It was time for the city to start its own collection of public art. In 1976, the Noguchi Playscape in Piedmont Park was commissioned and gifted to Atlanta by the High Museum of Art in celebration of the country's bicentennial.
Noguchi had come up with this concept for Play Mountain in 1933, and it never came to fruition until 1976 when the Playscape was made. He really wanted to bring design concepts and art to all the public. He intentionally made this come through in the playground so that everyone who came here, whether they realized it or not, would be exposed to high art.
Plans are being made to renovate the Playscape for its 50th anniversary in 2026. Atlanta's rich cultural history has inspired artists for decades, and much of their art honors the people who fought for our freedoms.
Art brings healing, solace,
peace, and sometimes a little controversy to the mind, but it also pushes the envelope around social justice issues. We have art that speaks to that.
This piece is particularly important because this is the home of John Lewis, the 5th District.
The bridge was created by sculptor Thornton Dial and can be found in Freedom Park. It commemorates John Lewis's involvement in the Selma to Montgomery marches and his rural Alabama roots. Dial was a favorite of the civil rights leader.
He requested that if he was going to be remembered at this plaza, that Thornton Dial's work would be selected. And if you look in the center of the bridge, there's a wonderful archway that resembles the Edmund Pettus Bridge and that piece of history and John Lewis's involvement with Bloody Sunday.
The city's art collection now numbers over 300 pieces to include paintings, photographs, sculptures, and monuments. While their name has changed, the Office of Cultural Affairs' mission never has.
We are always pushing towards improving the access for arts and culture.
The Cultural Experience Project has been aspiring to this goal for 20 years.
All of the Atlanta public school children get access to no-cost field trips for them to all of the cultural venues in the city. Atlanta's children should feel welcome in those places. Those places should program for Atlanta's children.
The program began under Mayor Shirley Franklin and remains a highlight of her time in office.
The 9th grade class was going to see Porgy and Bess by the Atlanta Opera. And I just loved that the students just ate it up. They were just enthralled.
When that opera started, within 5 minutes, you could hear a pin drop. And that is when I was reassured that we had done the right thing, that we were on the right path to exposing all of Atlanta's children to this rich cultural environment that we were supporting here in the city. You know, it was like an aha moment for me. And Mayor Franklin was there, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and it was just a beautiful feeling.
Art School is another youth program offered by the Office of Cultural Affairs that began in 1996.
It was modeled after a program in Chicago called Gallery 37. And the idea was that, you know, we would employ students to learn cultural trades.
The program has become a part of the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program, cultivating a new generation of Atlanta creatives.
The more that children get exposed to the arts, the more they see whether there's an opportunity for them.
Promotion of artists, cultural events, and venues is an important part of the city's support for the arts. Every autumn, Elevate Atlanta reimagines and activates sites throughout the city and immerses the public in the visual and performing arts.
It also provided us with an opportunity to develop relationships with some of our international partners. Just adds a little flair.
Atlanta has become a beacon to the creative economy.
There's an unbelievable amount of cultural capital that is flowing into this community, and that combined with this entrepreneurial spirit that we have within our city, long-standing entrepreneurial spirit, I think makes it a particularly dynamic place for the arts and culture to thrive and to have a really important impact in terms of our community.
What started with a meeting in Maynard Jackson's office in 1974 has fostered a healthy, vibrant cultural community.
Artists found a home here. And for the first time, in large numbers, Black and white, and now Asian and Latino and anybody who's a creator, found a welcoming, nurturing, supportive environment.
Hammons House Museum in the West End is well known for showcasing African American artists. The house once belonged to Dr. O.T. Hammons, an enthusiastic patron of the arts. Fulton County purchased the home after his death in 1985 and manages the grounds today. The Office of Cultural Affairs counts them as a partner.
The Hammons House is really a home. We're here to teach. We're here to support the community. We're here to, exhibit the artists, give them the platform so they can be seen.
The impact our region has on the creative economy cannot be overlooked. As a home to everything from high art to big budget film productions, Atlanta's art scene has come a long way since 1974.
That creative economy, by my view, started with a meeting in the mayor's office in 1974.
It was a spirited group, and it was, people were committed. We didn't have any disagreements or minor disagreements. People just did their part, and it's blossomed for 50 years.